Welcome. This is the first installment of the partnership between AIAS and WIELD as our Ask an Architect series for the month of March and Women's History Month. So we are here with Yolanda Cole. She is the senior principal and owner of Hickok Cole Architects and also the chair of the Washington District ULI chapter. And we are here to share her story and really talk about what career successes you've had, your inspirations, and how you got to where you are. So to begin, could you share a little bit about your current role and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, my title is Senior Principal and Owner of Hickok Cole Architects, and I'm actually the chair of ULI Washington, which they refer to as a district council. So I have two jobs, I guess you would say. My day job that is the firm, and then the job of leading a very large real estate organization at the same time. So I'm a busy person. Day to day, I could be doing just about anything. If you were to look at my calendar, it's full of blocks of, could be meetings in-house with project meetings, it could be marketing meetings, it could be I'm running out to a ULI event, or I could be here at the District Architecture Center. It's actually changes from day to day, which actually makes it interesting. So, or I could be doing some strategic planning for the firm. I could be working on things with the board that of the orchestra that I'm on. So I'm doing all kinds of things all the time.
That's pretty incredible that you get the time to do all of that. So what do you think are the things about you that, your strengths, that have channeled you into where you are today?
I guess I would say I'm a maximizer. That came from this Gallup piece where you can measure your strengths, and my number one strength came out of that is maximizer, and that is I like to take things that are good and make them great. So I tend to be a driver, a strategic visionary. I look to what's happening in the future or what could happen in the future, and I try to drive whatever organization that is toward that future. And I would say I'm a doer leader, so I'm not just telling people what to do, but I'm actually doing it as well. It's just my nature, I guess.
That's pretty incredible. And in other conversations that we've had and in presentations that you've had, it's pretty clear that you have a lot of passion and significant drive. It's pretty wonderful and overwhelming. Have you sensed personal development in this specific role as senior principal and owner of Hickok Cole?
Oh, I think there's personal development and professional development in anything and everything you do throughout your whole life. So one would hope so. It would be really, really bad if you just got stopped someday, I guess you'd say. So no, I'm always learning things new every day. And I actually strive to learn new things every day.
Which one of all the things, your two boards and your ownership, which one is most challenging, or which one right now feels the most rewarding?
Well, that's not a fair question, because I like them all, and I like them all for different reasons. I would say, for the firm, my passion right now is preparing the firm for the next generation, and so we've just gone through a big strategic planning session and rebranding of the firm. We're starting to sell stock to the next generation. So the concept there is to set up the next generation for their success, and so I am passionate about that. At ULI, I am passionate about some of the impact work that we're doing there. I'm particularly interested in housing and housing supply in this area over a broad range of price points, so everything from what we would call affordable housing here to unaffordable housing at the other end. And we're currently working on a big study, a report that should come out at the end of the month that is looking at the barriers to getting the supply that we need. So I have this, that's one of my particular interests, and so ULI is the place where I can make a difference in that. In the orchestra board, I actually play the flute, and that's probably the hardest thing that I do there. and I do have a music background, which you're probably going to ask me about.
Yes.
But I picked up my flute about 8 years ago, and I've been playing in the orchestra and also in chamber groups, and we've also been building the orchestra at the same time. So again, we're looking at something that existed as I came into it, and then I sort of poured myself into making it better, and we've turned it into a nonprofit, and we're now going after grants and growing the orchestra, so that's pretty cool too.
Right.
But it's hard.
It sounds incredibly hard, incredibly challenging. It sounds amazing. Well, to touch on your background, before architecture, you did other things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share a little bit about your as a student and your path to architecture?
I had always been a musician. I started playing piano and then the flute probably since about 8 or 10 years old. I was in bands, I was in the orchestra and all that. I then went to Ohio State University in music. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, went to Ohio State, and got a degree in music education with a concentration in flute. So I went from there right into architecture school, and that's always a big question mark. Why did you do that? But they're not as off base as you might think. So then I went to architecture school in Cincinnati into their co-op program, so I could work and go to school at the same time and pay for it. That took me to New York on a co-op effort, which is part of their program, and I worked at Cohn Pedersen Fox in its very early its stages. And I didn't go back, so I stayed in New York and transferred into Columbia University, into the master's program, into the second year of a 3-year program, and stayed in New York for the next 10 years. So it was not something I had planned out to go that way, but it was pretty cool anyway.
Yeah, and you were commenting previously that sometimes paths are not as linear as we expect them to be. And one of those paths landed you in Australia. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, that came through the Cohn Pedersen Fox era. We had a project in Sydney, Australia, and I was part of that design team. And we did up through the design development, or most of design development in New York, and then took the team to Sydney, Australia, and worked with a firm there to complete the building. So that was a really great experience. I was there for 2 years. With a team, and who could complain about that? It was really great. Came back at the in early 90s, which was the recession at that time, and that's when we moved to Washington, D.C. So that's how I got here from New York via Australia, I guess you'd say, and a little stint out on the Delaware River in the countryside as well.
Very nice. So
where I had my daughter, basically.
Oh, well, that's... Talking about daughters and work, could you talk a little bit about work-life balance and how you manage that with being a firm owner?
All right, people are going to be upset about this, but I don't actually believe much in work-life balance. I mean, you can make your life that way. You could say, I'm only going to do this in the work world, and so I can spend all this time over here in whatever other worlds those are, whether it's raising family or having some other interest or passion. But the truth is that there's always compromise. There are going to be compromises in all those places, depending on how ambitious you are in any one of those buckets. And if you're ambitious everywhere, then you're going to make choices, and they're going to be hard choices. And I don't know that I've ever reached balance. Nor I'm not even sure whether I've sought it either, but we just do the best we can and try to be as good as we can in whatever we do, to the extent that we can.
I think that's one of the best things I've heard in a very long time.
Yeah, I worry about this whole idea that we could have everything and do it only partially.
I would have to agree. I think something will fall short, or you'll be thin in some aspect of your life. So that's very interesting that you share that. I appreciate that. So being a firm owner, what motivated you to take that route? How did that come about?
Well, it wasn't planned. I can't say that I started out my career and somewhere along the line I said I wanted to own my own firm. Many people do. Certainly my partner, Mike Hickok, had always had an idea somewhere in his mind that he would own his own firm someday. It's really more that opportunities came my way at certain junctures in my life, and I decided to take them. And you do that with a lot of risk, I suppose, and fear at sometimes, but you have to believe.
That's good. I'm a firm believer that fear drives you a little bit. I think for me the goal, I would love to be truly fearless, but there has to be a little fear in what you do and to make that leap. So to wrap it up, what advice were you given that you would like to share, and what advice, if not the same, would you give students these days in pursuing the career in architecture?
Okay, those are two different things. The first one, if I'm going to give the advice to students, is I see a lot of anxiety about this idea about knowing what you want to do with your life and making a plan to get there. And I would just say, chill, you know. Let's just all calm down, you know, and really concentrate on what you're good at and just do a really good job. And those things will follow. I don't think you need to know when you walk in the door of any firm where it is you want to go in the next 5 years. I think you just do the work, do the best you can, and find holes that need to be filled, I guess you might say, and it will come to you. The other side, advice from me, in my era there were no mentors, nobody talked about mentorship. That's kind of all something that's relatively new, so I wouldn't say I had mentors, but I did have a really interesting exchange with Linda Rabbit, who's a giant in the construction industry and in the business world here in DC, and she once told me, this was after I'd gone to buy into a small firm, that I needed to either build a bigger sandbox or find a bigger sandbox than the one I was in. And even though I can't say that, okay, so I decided I was going to go find a bigger sandbox. In the end, she was right, and that's where I ended up. So I have my sandbox today, I guess.
And it's a really nice sandbox.
I kind of like it, yeah.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Well, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation, and I wish you all the success in the world. And I'm very grateful that you are our opener speaker for Women's History Month. So thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you. It was fun.